So today on CodeDependent, we're going to talk about transform effects. There's a new group of effects in Flex 4 that collect all of the operations that are happening on the internal transform of the object into one group of effects that actually work together. So this is an important point to make. We had similar effects in Flex 3. We had move and we had rotate. But they were actually completely separate. So move was operating on the XY location of the object. Rotate was operating on the rotation parameter of the object, just rotating it, right? Well, if the X and Y location of the object is actually the upper left corner of the object, typically the registration point or the transform center of the object, then if you're rotating the object around its center, which rotate did by default, you're also moving X and Y. So when you tried to do a move and a rotate at the same time, they would fight. Sometimes they would actually do both positions and you would get some sort of jittery artifacts as the thing shifted around. Sometimes one would clobber the other and you didn't actually get the value you were looking for because one of the effects would always win. And usually it was very difficult to actually get the effect you were looking for. I want these things to work together and to actually shift and rotate the object together over time. So we came up with a new approach in Flex 4, which we call transform effects. And there's basically a group of effects underneath a new superclass. The superclass is called animate transform. And the new effects are called move, rotate, and scale. And these effects, although they're separate, you declare them separately. Internally, they're actually working in collusion. It's like a little junta actually operating on your target object and doing all their stuff together so that when you say move this object from here to there and rotate this object from here to there and potentially scale this object at the same time, what they're doing is at every frame of the animation, they combine all of that information. They do one single transform operation, calculate the values for rotation and translation and scale all together, and then they set them on the object. So it's one atomic operation where everything happens together and you no longer have the fighting anymore. In fact, under the hood, it's actually fairly complex what's going on. We're actually using multiple keyframes and this sort of complex mechanism of combining all this information to make this stuff work. But at the surface of it, you don't actually need to care about that. All you need to know is that move and rotate and scale all work together to actually make sure that your effects can do the right thing on the target objects. So let's take a look at a demo application, which I call transform effects. And you can see that as we click on the button, it's going to move and rotate and scale at the same time. Now, one unrelated thing I want to point out is that notice that the text is visible the entire time. So previously, if you actually rotated a button or anything with text in it, the text would disappear unless you embedded the font. And that was because we're using a device font, and the device font only renders when you're in non-rotated or non-faded positions on the screen, and so it was sort of tricky to deal with actual rotation effects on components. Well, now we're actually using a new text engine in the new Flash Player 10 player, and that problem goes away, right? So we now have the capability to actually have text displayed on arbitrary objects no matter what transformation is happening to those objects. But that's a completely separate topic. What I really want you to focus on is the fact that we're actually doing a move and a rotate and a scale all together, and it actually looks fairly reasonable. We're telling the move, I want this thing to move from here to there. We're telling the rotate, I want it to go around in a full circle, 360 degrees, and we're telling the scale that I want it to go from 1x to 2x over time. So what does the code look like? So we have a declaration section, which is the new Flex 4-ism for saying here are my non-visual objects that I'm declaring in markup. We have a single parallel effect that's going to combine all of these things so that all the effects run at the same time. We have a move effect that's going to move from an x value of 50 to an x value of 150. It's declaring an auto-center transform property to be true. Now, one of the elements that you need to be aware of, since these things operate together, is there are some shared properties that they will all share when they run together. So one of those is auto-center transform. It's basically saying, do you want me to calculate the center of the object in 2D and place the center of rotation and the center of scale there, and then base all the transform operations around that? And in most cases, you probably do. So I've said auto-center transform equals true. In particular, the move doesn't care. The move is just going to shift the object in X and Y. That's fine. But the rotate and scale really do care about rotating around the center. So we'd set the same property on all of them since internally they're actually going to operate in cahoots. So we're going to move that object between those X values. We're going to rotate it from a degree of 0 to a degree of 360, again, setting the rotation transform. And we're going to scale the object from 1 to 2. Now note, scale is basically taking the place of zoom. The zoom effect is not being ported over from Flex 3. Instead, we have a more general effect which simply does a scale. It says, what do you want the scale factors to be before and after? And again, we're setting the center transform to be automatically centered. And when we click on the button, we play the effect, and then we get that. If you want to see the source code for this application or other related applications, check out my blog at graphics-geek.blogspot.com.